I'm 36. 4 years ago, I was living what I thought was the American dream. I had a stable job as a senior project manager at a construction firm, pulling in about $85,000 a year. Not rich by any means, but comfortable enough in our modest three-bedroom ranch-style house in the suburbs of Cincinnati. The kind of neighborhood where people still wave when they drive by, and the HOA only gets pissy about your lawn if you let it go for more than 2 weeks. I had married my college sweetheart Rachel, who I'd met during sophomore year when we were both taking the same economics elective at Ohio State. Listen, I never thought I'd be the guy telling this kind of story. Never in a million years. But sometimes life has a way of reminding you that no matter how carefully you plan things, no matter how much you sacrifice, it can all come crashing down in an instant. Rachel and I had been together for nearly 10 years when everything fell apart. We met when we were 20, got married at 25, and spent the next 5 years building what I thought was a rock-solid foundation. She had always been the ambitious one, brilliant, driven, with this infectious laugh that could light up a room. She had these hazel eyes that changed color depending on what she wore. Man, I used to tease her about that, saying she was like one of those mood rings from the 90s. When we first got together, Rachel was pre-med, and I was studying business management. We'd spend these long nights at the campus library, her buried in biology textbooks, me working through case studies. We'd take breaks at midnight, sneaking thermoses of coffee onto the quiet floor, whispering about our future between sips. She'd talk about becoming a doctor, and I'd talk about starting my own business someday. We had it all mapped out. After graduation, things didn't go exactly as planned. Do they ever? Rachel didn't get into med school on her first try. She was devastated, completely crushed. I remember finding her sitting on our apartment bathroom floor, rejection letter in hand, just staring at the wall. I sat down next to her, didn't say a word, just put my arm around her shoulders. We stayed there for hours. The next morning, she was back at it, researching post-bac programs, determined to strengthen her application. Meanwhile, I started working my way up at Midwest Construction Partners. Started as an assistant project manager, putting in 60-hour weeks, proving myself. Rachel took a research position at the university hospital, building up her resume. We were both grinding, both focused on our goals. Sunday mornings were sacred, though. No matter how busy we got, we always made pancakes together. Rachel would add chocolate chips to hers, arranging them into smiley faces. I always went with blueberries. Little traditions, you know? The kind of stuff you don't realize matters until it's gone. When Rachel finally got accepted to medical school 3 years after we graduated, it felt like everything was falling into place. The day that acceptance letter came, I picked her up and spun her around our kitchen until we were both dizzy. That night, we splurged on an expensive bottle of champagne, something we absolutely couldn't afford with our entry-level salaries and student loans. But damn, it felt good. We knew medical school would be tough. 4 years of intense studying, limited income, and then residency after that. We sat down, calculated the finances, and made a plan. I had just been promoted to project manager, making enough that we could survive on my income alone if we were careful. Rachel would focus entirely on school. No distractions, no compromises. That first year of med school was brutal. Rachel would leave the house at 6 a.m. and sometimes not return until midnight. Anatomy lab, lectures, study groups, it was all consuming. I'd come home from work, make dinner, pack her lunch for the next day, and often eat alone while watching whatever game was on. When she did come home, she'd usually fall asleep on the couch within minutes, textbook still open on her lap. I'd carry her to bed, set her alarm, and make sure her coffee mug was ready for the morning. Our friends started having kids, buying bigger houses, taking vacations. We did none of that. Every spare dollar went to Rachel's tuition, books, and educational expenses. I drove the same 2008 Honda Civic I'd had since college, putting off repairs until they became absolutely necessary. Rachel felt guilty sometimes, but I always shut that down quick. This was our plan. Her success would be our success. The sacrifice would be worth it. By year 2, Rachel seemed to be finding her stride. She'd made friends with a tight group of classmates who'd come over to study in our living room. I'd order pizzas, keep the coffee flowing, and retreat to the spare bedroom to give them space. I got used to the medical terminology they'd throw around, learned about board exams and clinical rotations through osmosis. Around this time, Rachel started mentioning Dr. Calloway. He was the director of the internal medicine program at the university hospital, apparently some kind of big-shot researcher with publications in all the top journals. He'd taken a special interest in Rachel's education, offering her a position in his research lab. It was a big deal, a real opportunity. Rachel was ecstatic, talking about how this could open doors for competitive residency positions later on. I remember the first time she mentioned staying late at the lab. It was a Wednesday in October, year 2 of med school. She called around 6 p.m., apologetic but excited, saying Dr. Calloway had invited her to observe a special procedure that evening. Of course I understood. This was what we'd been working toward. I wrapped up her dinner portion and put it in the fridge. Those late nights gradually became more frequent. Rachel would come home with these stories about cases they'd discussed, papers they were working on. Her eyes would light up when she talked about medicine in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. I was proud of her, genuinely. She was thriving, excelling. Dr. Calloway apparently told her she had remarkable potential. He was in his late 40s, married with 2 teenage kids. I had met him briefly at a department function. Tall, silver-haired, with the confident handshake of someone who was used to being respected. Life settled into a new rhythm. I'd taken on more responsibility at work, managing larger projects, dealing with the stress of demanding clients and tight deadlines. Often I'd come home mentally exhausted, pour a whiskey, and zone out in front of the TV. Rachel would be studying in the spare bedroom we'd converted into a mini library for all her medical texts. Sometimes we'd go days barely having a real conversation beyond logistics. Who would pick up milk when the car needed an oil change, which bills were due? But we still had our moments. Like when Rachel aced her first board exam, scoring in the top percentile. We celebrated by taking a weekend trip to a cabin in Hocking Hills, just a couple hours away. No internet, no textbooks, just us and the woods. We hiked during the day and made love in front of the fireplace at night. For those 48 hours, it felt like college again. Like us again. Year 3 of medical school meant clinical rotations. Rachel would cycle through different specialties, spending weeks in surgery, pediatrics, psychiatry, and so on. Her schedule became even more unpredictable, sometimes night shifts, sometimes weekends. I started picking up weekend work too, overseeing job sites, calculating that the overtime would help us pay down some of the mounting student loan debt. The financial pressure was real. Medical school wasn't getting any cheaper, and unexpected costs kept popping up. Special review courses for board exams, conference registration fees, even the proper attire for clinical rotations. It all added up. I refinanced our mortgage to get a lower rate, cut back on my 401k contributions, and sold my collection of vintage vinyl records that I'd been building since high school. Small sacrifices in the grand scheme of things. I kept telling myself it was an investment in our future. By this point, Rachel had decided she wanted to specialize in internal medicine, following in Dr. Calloway's footsteps. She talked about him constantly, how respected he was, how he was teaching her techniques that other students wouldn't learn until residency. I was grateful she had such a dedicated mentor. Really, I was. The medical world is competitive as hell, and having someone in your corner makes all the difference. The stress was taking its toll on both of us, though. My hair started thinning noticeably at 32. Rachel developed these tension headaches that would sometimes lay her out for an entire weekend. We were both running on empty, sustained by the promise of the finish line that was still years away. Residency would be another 3 to 5 years after medical school, depending on her specialty, but at least she'd be earning a salary then. Not much of one, but something. Year 4, the home stretch. Rachel was preparing for her final board exams and applying for residency positions. The house had become a war room with flashcards taped to every available surface. Our refrigerator was covered in anatomical diagrams instead of photos. I'd quiz her during dinner, reading from her study guides, while she closed her eyes and recited treatment protocols from memory. Dr. Calloway was writing her a recommendation letter, apparently a glowing one that would open doors at top programs nationwide. Rachel had joined him as a co-author on 2 research papers, an honor usually reserved for fellows or junior faculty. Her CV was impressive as hell. All our sacrifice was paying off. We were so close. Straight up, I didn't see the signs at first, or maybe I didn't want to see them. The human mind has this amazing ability to ignore what it doesn't want to process. It started with little things. Rachel got a new phone and suddenly had a passcode on it, something she'd never bothered with before. She explained it away easily enough, saying they dealt with patient information at the hospital and everyone was required to secure their devices. Made sense. Then there were the sudden changes in plans. She'd text saying she'd be home for dinner, then call later saying Dr. Calloway needed her help with a patient case and she'd be late. The clinical rotation schedule she'd given me no longer seemed to match her actual hours. When I mentioned this, she explained that medicine was unpredictable, emergencies happened, schedules changed. Again, plausible. I started noticing she was dressing differently too. Nothing dramatic, just more makeup on regular work days, a new perfume I didn't recognize, clothes that were a bit more stylish than the practical scrubs and comfortable shoes that had been her uniform for years. When I complimented her, she said one of her classmates had taken her shopping, that it was important to look professional now that she was applying for residency positions. That made sense too. The first night I really couldn't sleep was after finding a hotel receipt in her bag, a Marriott downtown from a Tuesday 3 weeks prior. When I asked about it, she seemed momentarily flustered, then explained it was from a medical conference. Dr. Calloway had secured funding for several students to attend. She was sorry she'd forgotten to mention it. It had been a last-minute opportunity. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to Rachel's breathing beside me, wondering why the explanation didn't sit right. The next morning, I checked our joint credit card statement. No hotel charge, but then again, if the department had paid for it. I started working out more, hitting the gym at 5 a.m. before work, pushing weights until my muscles burned. It helped with the insomnia, with the vague sense of unease that was starting to follow me around. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress was getting to both of us. Medical school was almost over. We just needed to hold on a little longer. But then came the texts. Rachel had left her Apple Watch charging in the bathroom one morning while she was in the shower. A notification popped up, a text from Dr. C that just said, "Same time tonight." Nothing inherently suspicious about a mentor confirming a meeting, right? But something about it made my stomach twist. That weekend, Rachel told me she needed to go into the lab to finish some research for her final project. She'd be gone most of Saturday. I nodded, said I'd catch up on some work myself. After she left, I sat in our kitchen for a long time, staring at her empty coffee mug, the lipstick mark on the rim. For the first time in our relationship, I did something I never thought I would do. I installed a location tracking app on our shared iPad that was linked to her iPhone account. Not to spy, I told myself, just to verify, just to quiet the voice in my head that wouldn't shut up. That Saturday, her location wasn't at the medical school lab. It was at a residential address in Oakwood, an upscale neighborhood about 20 minutes from our house. She stayed there for 6 hours. When she came home that evening, she talked animatedly about the progress she'd made in the lab, how Dr. Calloway had stopped by to give her some guidance on her research methodology. I nodded and smiled and died a little inside. The next week, I took a half-day off work without telling Rachel. I drove to the address in Oakwood. It was a large Tudor-style home with expensive landscaping and a BMW in the driveway. I parked down the street and pulled up property records on my phone. The house belonged to Thomas and Elizabeth Calloway. I told myself there could be an innocent explanation. A study group at her mentor's house, a special seminar for top students. I drove home, stopped at a liquor store, and bought a bottle of bourbon. Drank 3 fingers neat while sitting in our backyard, watching the sun go down. That night, Rachel got a call during dinner. She stepped out onto the porch to take it, her voice low. When she came back, she told me Dr. Calloway needed her to come in and help prepare for an important case presentation the next day. She'd be back late. Don't wait up. I nodded, told her to drive safe, Watched her grab her bag, a different one than her usual work backpack. Watched her check her hair in the hallway mirror before leaving. Heard her car back out of the driveway. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the location tracking. Watched as the dot that represented my wife moved across town, not to the hospital or the medical school, but back to that house in Oakwood. Something broke in me that night. I finished the bourbon, then opened a beer, then another. I sat in our dark living room, surrounded by the life we'd built together, the sacrifices we'd made, medical textbooks on every surface, framed photos of us on the walls, younger, happier versions of ourselves, with no idea what was coming. But I still needed proof. Real proof, not just circumstantial evidence that I could be misinterpreting. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. After Rachel left for her rotation, I went into our spare bedroom where she kept all her medical school materials. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Something, anything to convince me I was wrong. Instead, I found a second phone charging in the back of her desk drawer, a basic model, not her iPhone. My hands were shaking as I turned it on. There were only 2 contacts in it, T and home. Hundreds of text messages to T, going back months. I started reading them and the world tilted sideways. Can't wait to see you tonight. Missing you already. T thing you did last night. Still thinking about it. Mixed in with the explicit messages were others that made my blood run cold for a different reason. Got you access to the question bank for next week's exam. Use my login. Changed your evaluation for the cardio rotation. Attending never even reviews what I submit. Don't worry about the research data. I fixed the numbers. No one will question it with my name on the paper. It wasn't just an affair. It was academic fraud, cheating, falsifying research. Dr. Calloway wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was helping her cheat her way through medical school. The medical school I had sacrificed everything to pay for. I scrolled back further, trying to determine when it had started. The text went back almost 2 years. 2 years of lies. 2 years of me working overtime to pay tuition for a degree she was cheating to earn. 2 years of believing in her, supporting her, loving her. I must have sat there for hours, reading every message, each one another knife in my chest. Then I heard it. The garage door opening. Rachel was home, hours before she should have been. I hadn't planned what to say, how to confront her. I was still holding the burner phone when she walked into the spare room. She saw me sitting there, saw what was in my hand. The look on her face, not guilt, not shame, but annoyance. Like I was the one who had done something wrong by discovering her secret. That's when I knew. The woman I had loved for 10 years, had sacrificed everything for, was a stranger to me. She saw me sitting there, saw what was in my hand. The look on her face, not annoyance, not shame, but annoyance. Like I was the one who had done something wrong by discovering her secret. That's when I knew. The woman I had loved for 10 years, had sacrificed everything for, was a stranger to me. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice frighteningly calm. I remember how everything around me seemed to slow down. The phone felt impossibly heavy in my hand. I didn't throw it. I didn't scream. Something in me had gone very, very cold. "How long?" I asked. Rachel sighed, actually sighed, like this was some minor inconvenience in her day. "You weren't supposed to find that." "Clearly." I scrolled through the messages, my thumb trembling slightly. 2 years, Rachel? 2 fucking years? She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. I was searching her face for something. Remorse, shame, anything that would tell me the woman I married was still in there somewhere. There was nothing. "It's not what you think," she said, using the same tone she'd use when explaining a complex medical concept to me. "Tom and I have a connection. It's intellectual as much as physical." "Tom," I repeated, "not Dr. Calloway anymore. Tom." "And the cheating?" I held up the phone, showing a message about falsified research data. "Is that also an intellectual connection?" Something flickered across her face then, not guilt, but calculation. I could almost see her mind working, deciding which version of events would benefit her most. "Medical school is political," she said finally. "Everyone cuts corners. The system is designed to break you if you don't." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was a hollow sound that didn't even feel like it came from me. "And this?" I scrolled to an explicit message. one detailing exactly what she'd done with him on a night she'd told me she was at a study group. A night I'd stayed up late finishing a proposal for work, then made her favorite tea so it would be ready when she got home. She didn't answer, just stared at me with those hazel eyes that I used to think changed color depending on what she wore. Now I wondered if anything about her had ever been real. I stood up slowly, feeling like I was moving underwater. I've sacrificed everything for you. Everything. Our savings, my career advancement, any chance at a normal life. I haven't taken a vacation in 4 years because every spare dollar went to your tuition. I never asked you to do that, she said, and the coldness in her voice was like a slap. You're right, I said. You didn't ask. I offered, because that's what you do when you love someone. I walked past her, careful not to touch her, afraid of what I might do if I felt her skin against mine. Not violence, never that, but collapse. Disintegration. I was holding myself together by threads. What happened next is still a blur in my memory. I remember going to our bedroom, pulling a duffel bag from the closet, and methodically packing essentials. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, important documents from the safe in our closet, birth certificate, passport, the deed to the house, financial records. Rachel followed me, talking the entire time, explaining, justifying, minimizing. I didn't hear most of it. It was like she was speaking underwater. I caught phrases. It just happened. It didn't mean anything. We can work through this. All the cliches you think you'll never hear in your own life. When my bag was packed, I finally looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman I had built my entire life around. This stranger. I'll be back tomorrow when you're at the hospital to get the rest of my things, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Don't be here. This is my house too, she said, anger finally breaking through her composure. You can't just kick me out. I laughed again, that same hollow sound. Actually, I can. The mortgage is in my name only. We never added you because of your student loan debt. Remember? It was your idea. The look on her face, like she'd forgotten this critical detail, like she was quickly recalculating, told me everything I needed to know about her priorities. Where are you going to go? She asked, her tone shifting, softer now. Testing. That's no longer your concern, I said. I walked out of the house we'd shared for 7 years without looking back. Got in my car, that same 2008 Honda Civic I'd kept running on minimal repairs so we could afford her education. I made it about 3 miles before I had to pull over. The shaking hit me all at once, violent tremors that racked my entire body. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Just sat there on the shoulder of some suburban road, hands clenched on the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white, gasping for air like I was drowning. 15 minutes. That's how long I gave myself to fall apart. I watched the minutes tick by on the dashboard clock. When the 15 minutes were up, I took one deep breath, wiped my face, and called my friend Mark. Mark and I had been friends since college. He'd been my best man at the wedding. Over the past few years, we'd drifted apart, my fault mostly. I was always working, always focused on Rachel's needs, Rachel's schedule, Rachel's future. But Mark picked up on the second ring. I need a place to crash, I said, not bothering with hello. Just for a few nights. What happened? He asked. Rachel's been cheating, I said, and saying it out loud made it real in a way that seeing the evidence somehow hadn't. With her mentor, for 2 years. There was silence on the other end for a moment, then, Jesus Christ, come over, you still remember where I live? I stayed with Mark for 3 days. 3 days during which my phone exploded with calls and texts from Rachel. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I made a plan. The first call I made was to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, the best divorce attorney in Cincinnati, a shark in a tailored suit who charged $450 an hour and was worth every penny. I had to dip into my emergency fund for the retainer, but it was the best $10,000 I've ever spent. Her name was Diane Levinson, and when I sat down in her office and laid out the situation, including the evidence of academic fraud, her eyes lit up with the kind of predatory gleam that told me I'd made the right choice. Ohio is an equitable distribution state, she explained, sliding her glasses up her nose. Normally, that would mean splitting marital assets in a fair, though not necessarily equal way. But given the circumstances, the infidelity, the academic dishonesty, the fact that you financially supported her education, we have leverage. I don't want to destroy her, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Despite everything, some small, broken part of me still cared what happened to Rachel. I just want out. Clean. Fair. Diane smiled, not unkindly. Fair doesn't mean letting yourself be taken advantage of. She betrayed your trust personally and financially. There are consequences for that. I nodded, feeling something harden in me. What's the next step? First, we secure your financial assets. Second, we document everything. Third, we present her with a settlement offer that will make going to court look like a very unattractive option. That afternoon, I opened new bank accounts at a different bank. I transferred exactly half of our joint savings, fair is fair, and set up my direct deposit to go to my new account. I froze our joint credit cards. I changed the passwords on all our shared digital accounts. The next day, while Rachel was at the hospital, I confirmed this via the location tracking app I still hadn't deleted. I went back to the house with Mark and his truck. We worked efficiently, silently, loading up everything that was unquestionably mine. My clothes, my books, my desktop computer, the few pieces of furniture I'd brought into the marriage, a leather armchair from my first apartment, a set of vintage bar stools I'd restored myself. I left the wedding photos, left the matched set of coffee mugs we'd bought on our honeymoon, left the expensive watch she'd given me for our 5th anniversary. I didn't want anything that reminded me of us. As we were finishing up, I found myself standing in the spare bedroom, staring at the wall of medical textbooks we'd accumulated over the years. Each one represented hundreds of dollars, countless hours of study, a step toward the future we'd planned together. I ran my fingers along their spines, feeling the embossed D lettering, remembering how we'd carefully curated this collection. With a deep breath, I pulled out my phone and took a photo. Evidence, maybe, or just a final memory. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my new apartment, smaller, but mine. The divorce was finalized quickly. Rachel lost her residency placement when the Academic Review Board investigated her research fraud. I didn't push for that. It happened naturally once the documentation was presented. Was I the asshole? No. I protected myself. I maintained my integrity. I chose myself when nobody else would. I'm recording this story as a podcast now, a cautionary tale for anyone who's ever sacrificed everything for someone who didn't deserve it. And I want to know, where are you listening from? Drop a comment, share your story. If you're going through something similar, a betrayal, a breakup, a total life reconstruction, this is for you. You will survive. You will rebuild. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's actions. Stay strong, brothers.